flames. That's the latest treatment that we've seen in the newspapers. The former unemployed congressman joins us right now. Joe Kennedy, thank you so much for joining us. I would love to know your view of Mr. Biden as the last of your granduncle's Democratic Party, what he needs to do to bring normalcy to the Democratic Party, to find a Democratic center versus what is perceived by so much of America as a far left.
Look, I think, first off, good morning, and thanks for having me, and wonderful to be with you. Look, I think you have in the president-elect somebody whose service, whose dignity and decency, and at his core, a politics that is about building consensus and putting in that hard work to bring people together is literally defined who Joe Biden is. And I think you're going to see that. We've already seen that outstretched hand to an American public across the political spectrum to try to, as he has said many times, heal the wounds of these past years. The question is going to be, is that outstretched hand going to be met? And what we've seen already in the past couple of days, you all just alluded to this, is from leaders of the United States Senate, rather than folks that, for people that know better and know the damage that they might very well instill upon this country, on our institutions and on our democracy, rather than trying to turn the page and actually restore our country to doing that hard work, are trying to put ego and political ambition ahead of the good of the nation. And it's not very often these days that I have been left speechless, because I've been expecting the continued erosion here, but this is quite something.
Not all grew up with your advantages. The history of BBN in school in Boston and out to Stanford and such. Ian Bremmer took a different path. Tom Keene took a different path. And all of that was in a different America. How far is this 2021 America removed from that of your father, from that of your grandfather, and from the rest of your family? How far are we removed from the Kennedy of another time?
Well, I think part of the challenges we're seeing is, unfortunately, I think in many respects, we're not far enough removed from those challenges. The number of times, Tom and Ian and I have had this conversation as well, the number of times over the course of the past year, 18 months, that you hear these questions about comparing 2020 to 1968 are not insignificant. The battles that are on the front lines today about racial justice, about economic dignity, about trying to ensure that this is a country that actually meets its founding ideals of equality and a pathway for all, that's what the end of the 60s was all about. These are the fights on the forefront today. And I think in many regards, the challenge is that knowing what we know, that you've got a government as an institution that continues to lag behind the will of its people. And very briefly here, I agree with what Ian articulated in these challenges, but you look at what has happened on state ballot initiatives, on public referendum, on minimum wage, on voting rights, on healthcare. It is very clear where the country wants to go. The obstacle at this point is the government that continues to put up roadblocks and to prohibit our people from getting there.
But Congressman, good morning from London. Is it that clear? I mean, many people still voted for President Trump. And how does Joe Biden actually bring the nation together? As Ian put it, it's a very divided country, probably the most divided in the last couple of centuries.
So a couple of things. One, when you look at those issues like ballot initiatives, there's a clear pathway forward. Raising the minimum wage has actually brought appeal across many parts of the country. We've seen voting rights have increased popularity across the country. We saw that in Florida 2 years ago with the ballot initiative that restored voting rights to convicted felons, while Republicans actually won a governorship there and a Senate race and a very tight race. So there are, in fact, policies here that have widespread support. We've had a number of states that have increased access to health care through Medicaid expansion, yet having a Republican Party continue to put up obstacles to it. So I think on many issues here, it's not quite as divided as a Republican leadership or Republican base would like you to believe. Without question, it's a divided country, yes. I'd also point out that for all of the challenges we're seeing, we're not 1968. The challenges that we've seen, we haven't seen the level of unrest and violence in our streets that we've seen in other parts of our century. So, look, I'm not going to sit here and try to kind of paper over the real challenges we have. I think what you have here, though, is you've got a president, the voice of the American public that spoke and elected Joe Biden, has said we want to actually heal those wounds. The ultimate question is whether that effort is going to be met with a good faith effort by Republicans in Washington.
Congressman, let me get in also Ian Bremmer. Ian?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there's no question, I think Joe and I would agree, that Joe Biden has the temperament, the inclination, the experience to truly try to reach across the aisle and bring the country together. But no one's arms are long enough in this environment. I mean, domestically, the ability to pass the $2-3 trillion additional stimulus that clearly would be necessary this year, unless the Democrats pull off 2 seats in the Senate races in Georgia tomorrow, is a dead letter. And internationally, there are so many that prefer to see Joe Biden to Donald Trump, but they also recognize that they don't believe that they can trust the United States going forward. They see how divided it is. They're skeptical. They understand how Trump could have won, and indeed they're watching everything that's playing out in the United States right now is being magnified all over the world. And when I saw the Europeans cut that new Chinese multilateral trade deal just a week ago, right before Biden becomes president, that's a hedge. That's a really significant hedge from a lot of leaders that are thinking to themselves, I don't really believe that Biden's going to be able to accomplish what he says he wants to do. We can't come back to the United States that we once had, and clearly so many people would like to see on the global stage.
And Ian, I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, and Congressman, to that, how do you think, yeah.
I say I don't disagree with you. I do think that the optimist in me here just points out the fact that this is in fact a choice, right? This is not because Joe Biden doesn't want to get there. It's not because I think most of the Democratic Party wants, we do actually want to heal those wounds and move forward. What we need is Republican leadership to be able to meet us halfway. And what we've got, that is in fact what we're seeing play out, and I think shocking ways so far, to have 12 U.S. senators say they're going to actively dispute the certification of the Electoral College, and they know better, right? This is the underlying fundamentals that you point out are I agree with. The question, I think in large part, is going to be left to American political leadership to have the choice as to whether they want to sow that disruption or they want to move our country forward into a more powerful position in the 21st century.
Congressman, has President Trump actually changed U.S. politics forever and U.S. democracy?
He has certainly changed it for the short and intermediate term. And look, I think that I 100% agree with Ian's analysis here that what you're seeing is essentially 12 Republican senators as of now that have political aspirations that know that in order to be successful for the presidency, that they are going to need to have the support of a Donald Trump base. And I think that Donald Trump is going to remain the loudest voice in a Republican Party until there is a next Republican president, or at least for the next 4 years. And again, that is a choice that Republicans have to make as to whether they're going to continue to countenance, forget the kind of irrationality or the norm breaking or anything else. Once again, actions that border on, if not cross, legality. And yet another reason why a president could and should be, in my mind, impeached because of what he just tried to do.
Joe Kennedy, I want to circle back to where we were at the beginning of trying to stagger into 2021, Republicans, Democrats, all disaffected. Dr. Bremmer in his report mentions college-educated urbanites as defining your Democratic Party. How does your party get to the labor-centric belief that was in other generations? How do you get back to labor support? What's the actual method of doing that?
Look, the actual method of doing that is showing up and fighting for working families across this country. And yes, obviously, I think we would all agree we should be about expanding access to education and access to higher education. But that does not mean you leave behind people that, as we say, shower after work rather than before. That means that you got to understand that the policies that for a long time Democrats have championed about increasing access to opportunity, that if people still didn't get them get that opportunity because of barriers, domestic or international, that they've not felt left behind. They have been left behind. And for Democrats to not recognize that and not turn around and say, hey, we're going to fight for you too, that has been Donald Trump's observation, and that's part of the success that he's had in his rhetoric, if not the policy outcome. Success in the rhetoric that is a warning to all Democrats.
Ian Bremmer, within the top risks that you write up here on the United States of America, there's just the time ticking on, the demographic changes out into the 2030s, the 2040s. What do you perceive over the next 1, 2, 3, and even 5 years as being the democratic shift in what it will do for our politics, a demographic shift, I should say?
Well, one thing that's exciting is that when you look at millennials that are educated around the world, you're not just talking about white folk, you're talking about, emerging markets suddenly dominating and sharing ideas. I mean, when I was a kid growing up in Chelsea, Massachusetts in the projects, not that far from Joe, by the way, I didn't know any of those kids. I wasn't into K-pop, for example. I wasn't on Fortnite, sort of doing gaming with kids from India or Cambodia or whatnot. Millennials today are doing that. And one of the reasons why climate change is really moving, and if there's one place that Biden will truly be effective compared to Trump, it's in actually embracing a post-fossil fuel trajectory for the U.S. government and the U.S. economy, precisely because the markets have already been moving in that direction for some time. But they're doing that because young people all over the world are connected to a global understanding that climate is going to screw them as young people in the future if they don't actually take action. So there are reasons to believe that millennials will be more global. They will be more connected. They will be less stovepiped. But those are not the people that are running Washington right now. And that demographic shift you're talking about, when so many Americans are feeling disenfranchised, when so many Americans are taking it on the chin on the back of this coronavirus, not those of us in the knowledge economy that can socially distance, but those that are stuck, the essential workers that are treated like anything but. Yeah. And that gap is immense and painful and drives incredible risk and uncertainty in 2021.
Ian, thank you so much. Ian Bremmer there of Eurasia Group, and we'll talk a lot more about climate change. And thank you to the former Congressman, of course, Joseph Kennedy of Massachusetts. Now, coming up, we'll talk about energy. We'll talk about fossil fuel with Daniel Yergin, author of the new map, Energy, Climate, and the Clash of Nations. He's also from IHS. This is Bloomberg.
If you know what it's like to keep the books and pay employees, you're one of the few. Navigating taxes, shifting laws, protecting your bottom line makes you realize how valuable time really is. That's why Patriot Software lets you handle your accounting and payroll all in one place. Every dollar out, every dollar in, saving you countless hours and giving you a complete financial picture for peace of mind.
With PatriotSoftware.com, accounting and payroll, keep your time and money.
Go to PatriotSoftware.com today.
Jim and Joanne are here to pick up the same prescription. They both know the system is not on their side. They both know drug costs are out of control. But one of them is taking back control with GoodRx. Next. So while he's paying that much, even with his insurance, she's paying this much just by using GoodRx. Use GoodRx to compare prices at pharmacies in your area and stop paying too much for your prescriptions. Download the free app today and take back control.
No matter what happened in 2020, it's a brand new year. And with HelloFresh, it's 365 days to start fresh. 365 ways to make time for yourself. Make time for the kiddos and make their new all-time favorite meal. Just take it step by step and we'll make it happen. One dish at a time.
Hit refresh with HelloFresh. Go to HelloFresh.com and use code TV10 for 10 free meals, including free shipping.
For the scale of our business, we reached a point where we had no choice but to become more efficient. And that's where the software developer comes in. Understanding the data is transforming the way that we grow food.
Transform your business today. Fiverr.
When we started our business, we were paying like an arm and a leg for the postage. I remember setting up ShipStation. I think it was just like 1 or 2 clicks. Everything was up and running. I was printing out labels and saving money.
ShipStation saves us so much time. It makes it really easy and seamless. Pick an order, print everything you need, slap the label onto the box, and it's ready to go.
Our cost for shipping, like, were cut in half, just like that.
ShipStation, the #1 choice of online sellers. Go to shipstation.com/try and get 2 months free.
It's time for the lowest prices of the season on the Sleep Number 360 smart bed. You can adjust your comfort on both sides, your sleep number setting.
Can it help me fall asleep faster?
Yes, by gently warming your feet.
But can it help keep me asleep?
Absolutely. It intelligently senses your movements and automatically adjusts to keep you both effortlessly comfortable.
Will it help me keep up with Mom?
You got this.
So you can really promise better sleep?
Not promise, prove. Don't miss our New Year's special. The Queen Sleep Number 360 C2 smart bed is only $8.99. Plus, no interest until January 2024 on all smart beds. Ends Monday.
Bloomberg Surveillance, and we celebrate Eurasia Group's top risks of 2021. Francine Lacroix in London, where Julian Assange will not be extradited to the United States. I'm Tom Keene in New York. An eventful Monday here, first full week of the year, I should say. Ian Bremmer is with us. He's president of Eurasia Group. And among the themes, we've been talking about the politics of America. That'll be a huge focus for Bloomberg News over the next coming days. And Dr. Bremmer mentioned climate change as well. Folded all into that is one of the risks that's there each and every year, and that is oil. A quick look at the chart of oil. Maybe it is the chart here of the day. Brent crude, when we knew it above $100 a barrel for a sustained time. And then the collapse of oil and, of course, the negative prices that we saw earlier this year back to $50 a barrel. That is a precursor for Daniel Yergin. The New Map is his new book. It's my book of the year. It is just a beautifully written exercise in our geopolitics and, of course, of oil and the new oil, I should say, as well. Dan Yergin, wonderful to have you with us here with Dr. Bremmer. I need to go right to our immediate geopolitics. What should President Biden's approach be to Saudi Arabia and to Russia?
I think his approach to Saudi Arabia will be measured. The Saudis have not been looking forward to a Biden presidency. There'll be new stresses in the relationship, and there will be no sword dance as there was when President Trump made his first visit there. I think so. It will be a different relationship, and Saudi Arabia will be doing some things to try and, kind of ameliorate it, but it will be frosty. I think on Russia, it's obviously there will be always a discussion, how do we get back into some reasonable relationship with Russia? But after this massive cyber attack on government and private business, that's just going to make it much more difficult. So it starts off on a very bad foot. And you ask once again, what were the Russians thinking? What did they achieve by doing this?
The commanding heights of oil at $50 a barrel, are they commanding heights, or is it a global oil complex that is desperate and fragile?
I would say it's more of the latter, because while it is creeping out of that virus alley of 40 to 50, it's now just a little over 50 if you look at Brent, but you have a big overhang of oil supplies in terms that OPEC and non-OPEC, OPEC Plus are holding back. Plus you have the question of whether there will be some dialogue between the U.S. and Iran that will relieve sanctions on Iranian oil. So there's a lot of overhang, but the good news is that as it's not as fast as it should be, but as vaccinations spread, as the economies open up again, one result of that will be more economic activity, and oil will get into an area that would support future investment, which has really been cut very dramatically over the last year.
Daniel, good morning from London. Are we going to see peak oil sooner than we think? because of climate change action, because of concerns surrounding fossil fuel and carbon emission?
Well, I think that is probably that and energy transition are the two big questions that you run into in oil circles, energy circles around, and climate circles around the world. I still think that peak demand is probably about a decade away. We're seeing these announcements about banning internal combustion engines, but there would be 2030 or 2035. On the other side, you're going to add another billion people or so to the world. Economies hopefully will recover. And so I don't think it's as imminent as we think. And something else people forget is, for instance, in the United States, cars stay on the road for 12 to 15 years. They don't just go away somewhere. So I think it is an energy transition, but I think it's a longer process than snapping your fingers.
Ian, how do you see this developing?
Well, it's so funny. I mean, the lifespan of a horse is about 12 to 15 years. And, once you got the steam engine, you still didn't, crush the horse population until after the existing horses no longer had a lifespan. And then you just stopped. And then within one generation, horses went to about 10% of what they were before. They became useful for entertainment and for food. And that was it. And the question is that where we're going with cars, with combustion engines? Look, it's an extraordinary change when you have the United States government with by far the most important appointment that Biden is making is John Kerry, who ran for president, who was Secretary of State, who believes he should have been president, certainly thinks he's smarter than Joe Biden, and he's creating a new cabinet position that will be staffed to focus on climate. I think this is a massive shift. And by the way, I think one of the more interesting things that we're going to see over the coming year, as the Americans as a polity start taking this very seriously as a government, is that we're going to want to look forward after these 10 years when it's no longer as much about fossil fuels. Who's going to dominate these new technologies? And, under the Trump administration, if you want to talk about solar or wind or electric vehicle infrastructure, you're talking about China. So actually, this is going to create more geopolitical competition between the two largest economies, the U.S. and China, than a lot of people might have thought, thinking, when the Americans talk about climate, it'll be kumbaya for everyone together. Actually, there's a lot more geopolitical competition coming.
I think that's
if I can jump in there,
please, Dan, please.
That means that the supply chains, the supply chains of oil have always had a lot of tension around them. As Ian is saying, there's going to be tension now around the supply chains, because look at the way China dominates the lithium-ion battery supply chain. One thing about cars that's very interesting, if every car in the world today was an electric car running on wind and solar, you would reduce emissions, CO2 emissions, by about 6%. So you have to look at the whole totality in terms of really having an effect. But if you look at where the automakers are, their investment is certainly shifting to electric cars, so they see that there is going to be a tipping point.
Daniel Yergin, as Dr. Bremer mentions John Kerry, I sat on a stage in Davos with John Kerry, and he was really quite something. The facts involved, the knowledge base that he had on climate change. He also has a knowledge base that there is the U.S. Senate. Heaven forbid if one senator went from the prize and read it, and then they went to the Quest and read it, and then they went to the new map and read it. Could you have a Senate that would go along with President Biden and support some form of political climate change policy? Or does the Senate block all?
No, I think, it depends what happens tomorrow in Georgia, but on that in a very near term. I think that you would have people supporting it, but I think it's a question of understanding the time frames involved and the cost. And Ian's report about the risk makes a very important point that may not be looked at right now, but it's the cost of COVID and the cost of dealing with COVID afterwards. So government budgets are going to be strained between what they want to do in terms of climate and energy transition on one side, and actually continuing to heal the economy on the other. So there will be a fiscal pressure there that will also have to be part of the equation.
Yeah, and you look at countries like Brazil and India that are very carbon intensive on the back of all of this. That, it's going to be very, very hard for them in a post-COVID environment to say, we're going to move on and align with all these countries. Yep.
Ian, is it too tenuous to make the link between, Russia, oil-rich country, Saudi Arabia, oil-rich country, and what role they have to play geopolitically? So if Russia sees the price of oil go down, peak oil maybe sooner than we think, do they become more belligerent?
I think Russia is becoming more belligerent because generally they are a country in decline. And they blame the United States for that, and Putin has control. Where in the case of the Saudis, I do think that this is going to move them more quickly towards diversifying their economy. They may not be effective, and some of the 2030 vision is obviously pie in the sky. But I think they're going to be buffeted much more by their environment, where in the case of Putin, he's angered by that. He's lashing out. So belligerence is the right question when you talk about Moscow.
Ian Bremmer with us. It is the top risks of 2021, and we thank Daniel Yergin of IHS Markit and, of course, his new book, The New Map, most readable. Dr. Yergin, thank you so much. With our first word news in New York City is Ritika Gupta.
Thanks, Tom. President Trump pleaded with Georgia election officials to find thousands of votes and change the state's election result. That comes from a recording of an extraordinary phone call that took place over the weekend. The president ranged from flattery to threats during the course of the conversation, but the Georgia officials didn't back down. The White House isn't commenting. Schools in England may need to stay closed longer than expected. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson also said that tougher restrictions will probably be used to fight the coronavirus epidemic. Virus cases are surpassing 50,000 a day. The opposition Labour Party says the country should immediately return to a full lockdown. And U.S. infectious disease chief Anthony Fauci says the rollout of coronavirus vaccines in the U.S. is picking up speed. Fauci spoke to ABC News.
We are not where we want to be, no doubt about that. But I think we can get there if we really accelerate, get some momentum going, and see what happens as we get into the first couple of weeks of January.
The U.S. missed its goal to have 20 million people vaccinated by the end of the year, but Fauci says the rate has now picked up to about 500,000 people a day. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Ritika Gupta. This is Bloomberg. Tom.
Ritika Gupta, thank you so much. There's so much to talk about here on the politics of the nation and, of course, on energy as well. I'm Rita Sen in the 8 o'clock hour. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg.
later today. Julie Norman, University College London professor. This is Bloomberg.
Good morning, everyone. Eurasia Group, the top risks of 2021. I've got 15 ways to go here with Francine Lacroix on those top risks right now. We could look at the markets up, the ascent of the markets for the haves. It's a beautiful chart in Eurasia Group on American income disparity and income inequality. Ian Bremmer with us right now, Eurasia Group president. Ian, I want to fold in here something you were so prescient on, and that is China. And of course, a stronger renminbi is a single chart here about, crouching dollar and the hidden weakness that we've seen in the dollar right now. Dr. Bremmer, part of this is also the politics of China is noted by the 2-month absence of Jack Ma within capitalism and within his business affairs. What is the symbolism of Jack Ma unreported to the China-U.S. dialogue?
Yeah, it's quite something. Jack Ma basically has done a better job of antagonizing powerful actors than probably any other individual in the world. And that's a pretty dangerous thing to do. It's not illegal, but it's dangerous. You can ask Navalny, the opposition leader that was poisoned in Russia, about that. It's quite something. Ma's incredibly wealthy. He's prescient. He's a hero for the average Chinese. And that makes him a threat and unacceptable to Xi Jinping and the leaders of China. And also the fact that the Chinese government has decided, and you look at their coming 5-year plan, this dual circulation idea, where they focus more on domestic consumption, but also on securing Chinese supply chain for critical strategic sectors. And that because they see that the Americans on 5G, on Huawei, that they've been hitting the Chinese pretty hard. And they know that financial technology, fintech, where, Ant Financial, that Jack Ma has been dominating, that is critical strategically to the success of the Chinese economy, the Chinese government. That means they want control.
Right.
So the fact that Jack Ma has said these things at the same time that this fight with the Americans is coming down the pike has really created big problems.
Global finance is global finance, certainly the purview of Bloomberg. Dr. Bremmer, what is the responsibility of Western banks, and particularly American too-big-to-fail banks, within the U.S.-Chinese relationship? What should be their action plan, for example, on Hong Kong?
The banks that are in Hong Kong aren't going anywhere. They understand. If you're HSBC, if you're Standard Chartered, you understand that Hong Kong, as a critical node for doing business in mainland China, is much more valuable to you and your global business than standing up for Hong Kong as a Western place where your expats can feel comfortable that there's rule of law. So they're dealing with the fact that Hong Kong no longer has a separate political system. There is no longer any democratic opposition in the LegCo. In Hong Kong, there is no longer any capacity to speak your mind in a free and open media in Hong Kong. It is no longer a Western environment in any way, shape, or form. The one country that's done something, it's not the banks. The fact that the UK, everyone's talked about how many mistakes they've made, but they are actually giving a lot of passports out to Hong Kong nationals that are basically getting done over by China, by the Chinese government not willing to support one state, two systems.
Ian, at number 2 for your top risks, you have long COVID. Are we underestimating how quickly our economies can bounce back once we have the vaccines?
I don't think we're underestimating that in the developed world. I think that the United States rebound will be fast and very robust. It's just that it's not going to affect as many Americans as I think we would like. In other words, in the United States, in Europe, there's going to be much more division of, are you in the knowledge economy, are you not? Are you able to socially distance? Are you not? Are your jobs coming back? Have you been evicted from your home? How can you handle the closure of schools for a year? These things are going to have major knock-on consequences for inequality and political and social instability across the United States and Europe, where for the developing world, for emerging markets, and we talked with Dan Yergin a little bit about this in the last segment, they're not getting vaccines as quickly as the United States and Europe is. They're not bouncing back as quickly, and their budgets are under a lot more strain. So you have divisions inside the wealthy economies, and then you have the growing gap between rich and poor countries in the world, both of which play out as long COVID in 2021.
Ian, thank you so much. Ian Bremer there of Eurasia Group with the top risks of Eurasia 2021. Now, also, don't forget, tomorrow it's all about Georgia and the U.S. Bloomberg TV and Bloomberg Radio will have special coverage of the Georgia runoff elections. That's Tuesday, January 5th, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. This is Bloomberg.
Left out right at the register.
Well, isn't that part obvious?
Doesn't matter. You're still not the guy.
Well, I'm a guy.
Cut. Let's try it again.
Try what again?
Ah. Hey, you. Yeah, you.
I opened a SoFi Money account, and it was the first time that I realized I can be earning interest back on my money.
I just discovered SoFi, and I'm an investor with a diversified portfolio. Who am I?
I refinanced my student loan with SoFi because of their low interest rates.
Thanks, SoFi, for helping us get our money right. Thank you.
This is a special edition of Bloomberg Surveillance. I'm Francine Lacqua here in London, Tom Keene in New York. Now, we track COVID-19, of course, across the world to an exclusive interview, and Israel, world-leading vaccination drive, has already administered first doses of the Pfizer shot to more than 12% of its population. Well, Bloomberg's Manus Cranney spoke with the nation's health minister on its future rollout plans.
The response of the population is incredible. The efficiency of our medical teams is beyond any belief. And we are very happy with what's going on. We're just all the time reminding the public that we are trying to take the population at risk out of the equation. It still doesn't mean that the country has herd immunity or that we left coronavirus behind us.
The pace, we want to try and understand the pace. How sustainable is the pace of 150,000 doses per day?
We are keeping the pace for the last, I would say, 10 days. We started vaccination a little bit more than 2 weeks ago, but on the first couple of days, we were just vaccinating the medical teams in hospitals, in our HMOs. And then we started with 60 plus population. We added to that some chronic diseases. This is the population we are targeting right now. Operation of that kind definitely has some, let's say, some default in terms of in the end of the day, you can sometimes find some remnants of the vaccine where we call upon anyone who wants to get vaccinated to come and get the shot. But we are in general satisfied having 75 to 80% of those vaccinated as the population we targeted.
Will that slow down? Will that curve slope down over the next couple of weeks?
Well, I don't think so, because what will happen in about a week from now, we will start administering the second dose, the second shot of the vaccine to those who already had gotten the first one. So we will keep the same pace. What will happen, though, that our HMOs won't be giving appointments for the first shot.
Are you expecting any emergency supplies to make sure that your supply chain is full and robust? Any emergency supplies from any of the vaccine providers this month of January?
Unfortunately, at this stage, it doesn't look doable. Our next supply is supposed to come in the very beginning of February, which, as I've said, leads us to the situation where we will have to just give the second shot at this stage. If there will be pleasant surprises, we will be more than happy to use the new supplies. But right now, we are not starting with additional segments of the population.
There's a great debate raging in a number of countries about the correct interval between dose 1 and dose 2 on the Pfizer BioNTech. What are you recommending? What's good for Israel?
We are keeping the recommendations of the company itself, of Pfizer. We are giving the second shot in 3 weeks from the first one. We know that it's not dangerous to be late a couple of days, but our HMOs are trying to immediately set an appointment 3 weeks later.
Well, that was Israel's Health Minister, Yuli Edelstein, speaking to our Manus Krani on the rollout of the vaccine, some of the challenges, and, of course, some of the important logistics surrounding that. In the meantime, it's a big day, of course, for U.S. politics. Tomorrow we have the Georgia election, and we'll be spending quite a lot of time today after that Eurasia special looking at the risks to 2021. This is the impact on the markets. Now, we're seeing some weakness in dollar. This is probably one of the stories that could be with us for a lot of 2021. Gold is jumping. If you look at U.S. futures, they're rising with European stocks, and it's very clear that treasuries are declining whilst copper and nickel are advancing. Well, that wraps up our coverage of the Eurasia Group's top risks. More Bloomberg surveillance ahead.
This is a market that over the past few weeks has made it clear it wants to go higher. It got a little spooked by the idea that geopolitical tensions are rising.
ButcherBox. We deliver high-quality meat to your door. What happens next is up to you.
The future of fitness isn't dumbbells. It's revolutionary digital weight that learns as you get stronger. So you can be your strongest. Visit tonal.com.
No time to read? The
Blinkist app gives you the key ideas from the world's best nonfiction books in just 15 minutes. And with audio, you can listen and learn on the go. Fit reading into your life with Blinkist. Visit Blinkist.com or download the Blinkist app now.
If you're only making minimum credit card payments, it's costing you a lot in bad compounding interest.
We explore the trends, investments, and competition of the European ETF industry. Join us on Bloomberg ETF IQ Europe.
Have an economic recovery and not necessarily a stock market recovery.
We all knew winter was coming, but you got all the bears in hybrid.
This is Bloomberg. Jonathan Farrow and Lisa Abramowitz.
Good morning, everyone. Jonathan Farrow, Lisa Abramowitz, and Tom Keene. We say good morning to you. Good morning, 2021. Our first show of the year. Lisa Abramowitz and Tom Keene. Jonathan Farrow. It's like Gilligan's Island. Yeah. It's a 3-hour tour, and he's off somewhere. Lisa, where in the world is John Farrow?
So John Farrow took off a couple of weeks to invest more heavily in Bitcoin. We heard that he was really caught up in the trend. So that's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, he sold the DoorDash. He sold the 8,000 shares of DoorDash, launched onto Bitcoin, I think at 20,000, and up he went, and I guess they've round-tripped it. Bitcoin right now, 30,000, make it 31,000. It's a little different than it was over the weekend. Anyways, we welcome all of you on radio, on television. The news flow does not let up. Lisa, really extraordinary what we saw from the president last night. The impact in the currency markets is tangible.
Yeah, the idea of dollar weakness pervading markets in a really concrete way. And I really think, Tom, the election in Georgia tomorrow will determine so much of the fate of the nation with respect to Biden's outlook and what he can possibly get passed. Interesting to see how it's playing out, but really hopium. I mean, 2021, another year of just incredible enthusiasm.
Well, we saw that with the pandemic, and of course, just on with Ian Bremmer and Eurasia Group. We thank Dr. Bremmer for all of his help in making for an interesting 2 hours. Kevin Cirilli will join us here in a bit. That Georgia, the two races, really indeterminate right now. Maybe that's what we see. We'll do the data here in a moment. Lisa Bramwell, let's start out with a 2021 morning brief.
Yeah, there's a question here of how strong manufacturing will be in the U.S. For the month of December. We have seen incredible strength there, boosted in part by that weak dollar, boosting the price of some of the commodities. The interesting thing is we got German data overnight that was the strongest for manufacturing in 2.5 years. Today, also OPEC Plus holding their monthly meeting. Interesting to see whether they decide to continue to increase output. A lot of dissent, a lot of disagreement between Russia and Saudi Arabia on that front based on ongoing weakness. And President Trump and President-elect Joe Biden both are campaigning in Georgia. Turnout so far in early voting, Tom, already at record highs. Even though we haven't had the day of, a lot of people are watching, in particular, the African-American voters that have been coming out in force at record numbers. A lot of people seeing that as strength for the Democrats. Really, this will determine so much of the agenda for the next couple of months.
And we'll see that with Kevin Cirilli here again in a moment. Let me look at the data check right now, and it's real simple, folks. It is up off of the strong currencies, weak dollar view. Equity futures up 18 right now, up as much as 20 earlier. Dow futures rather up 160 points, and the VIX 23.05. In the currency space, this is important. It is a weaker dollar. It is a weaker Bloomberg dollar index, but it's the way that it's weaker. It is massively Pacific Rim based. Yes, Canada in stronger loonie. Even Mexican peso goes out to almost new strength as well. Turkish lira is idiosyncratic. We'll leave that alone. But what you really see is a Pacific Rim bet going on right now with Asia DXY out. And Chinese yuan is maybe your pro statistic of the day. A stunning 6.46. That is renminbi strength that will drive and correlate that dollar market into what we see in equities. Benjamin Laidler of Tower Hudson, who was brilliant in December 2-3 years ago, called again out of the pandemic for double-digit returns. This morning, Ben Laidler of Tower Hudson reaffirms an unprecedented 3 double-digit years in a row. That is really, really extraordinary. To opine on the equity markets, Lisa Abramowitz and I are thrilled to bring Stuart Kaiser in as my first interview of the year, UBS Head of Equity Derivatives Research. Stuart, let me just go right to what Ben Laidler said is not permable, but a dead right on bull. Can we see double-digit gains in 2021?
Hi, Tom, Lisa, good morning, and Happy New Year. I would say, why not? I guess would be my answer to that. You have the VIX at 23, you have a tremendous amount of risk premium still priced into the market. And, it's hard to imagine that risk premium coming out of the market without equities rising. So, what the specific return number is, obviously impossible to know ahead of time, but I would say, the table is set there for the markets to continue to rally this year, just because there's a lot of risk premium and a lot of uncertainty in the markets right now. And as that comes out, it tends to be positive for equity returns.
Within your study of the cross moments of derivatives, the dynamics of the quantitative space, what is the speculative bet right now?
The speculative bet? Look, I think where the market is in a place where they're very positive about the growth outlook. They're very positive about equity markets, the way you said. But there's still a reasonable amount of uncertainty out there. And I think for that reason, the speculators have been a little bit cautious to lean against the high volatility that we're seeing in the market. So if you look at, where the VIX curve is at around 25 or 26, the markets realized that kind of volatility about 10% of the time over the last, 80 years. So I think right now what you're seeing is I think people would like to lean against that high volatility, but there's just, too much, I think, confusion about what the path is for the virus and a lot of muscle memory in terms of what happened last year. So people are being a little bit cautious in terms of really being quote unquote short volatility because of what we saw last year. But the way risk is priced, the speculative trade would be to lean against that and be short volatility or be short, longer dated puts on the S&P 500. I think the market's struggling to find the natural person to put that trade on right now, Tom.
Well, and Stuart, that raises a question of whether fundamentals and historical models work at a time when cash is supreme and massive in terms of its supply based on central banks and what we're seeing on the fiscal policy making side. Just to point this out, $240 billion went into money market funds last year. That was the biggest amount into all debt funds. How much is this just purely a cash game and not at all connected to fundamentals at this point?
Well, to me, I'm a fundamentals person, so I think fundamentals ultimately do matter, whether that's earnings growth or economic growth. I think to your point, the involvement of central banks in the financial markets is at a level that has never been in the past. And I think a lot of people would argue that that's allowed valuations, perhaps not to get to levels they wouldn't have gotten to, but to get there faster. And so I think the question that people are asking now is, the S&P was up 16% last year in, a very crazy year with a difficult economy. So I think the question is the equity market ahead of the economics at this point? And could we see a period of time where the economy continues to improve, but the equity market kind of moves sideways, just because it sort of, ran ahead for a while? My view would be that if you get the economic growth and the earnings growth that we expect, and to have volatility priced the way it is, that ultimately fundamentals will push you higher. But I think it is a fair question to ask about what is the timing and what is the cadence of those two things. Has the cash inflow into the market from central banks allowed equity markets to sort of run the race before the economic data appears? And in that case, then I think you'd probably be a little bit more cautious or just a little bit more conservative in terms of what your return outlooks are for the markets. But, base case for us is the path of least resistance is going to be higher, and you just end up then in a debate about what the magnitude is.
All right, if fundamentals still matter, why do people not care that the vaccination schedule seems to be delayed, at least in the United States, if not globally?
I think it's a fair question. I've been a little bit surprised, frankly, that the news we had from Pfizer, then from the UK in terms of mutating virus, et cetera, and the slower pace of rollout in the US. I would have expected that to be a little bit more of a headwind to markets. And it hasn't been. And I think given the very, very high efficacy numbers,
This is Bloomberg Best, your weekly review of the most important business news, analysis, and interviews from Bloomberg Television around the world.
Ken Burns, welcome to Bloomberg Big Decisions.
We have always been a mixture of things. We are always stronger for that mixture.
Growth is a way to stay competitive, delight more and more consumers.
Are you worried that people won't take the vaccine?
We remain concerned about vaccine hesitancy.
What is one word of advice you'll take with you?
Learn how to listen. And that is certainly something that has served me well.
Ankiti, where do you go from here? It's a huge market. It's a huge opportunity. I want to go 100x from here.
Our philosophy is to partner where we can and stand apart when we should.
Lisa, I look at all this and I look at the bond dynamics. I was away for what was it, 3 or 4 weeks?
Yeah.
Equities bonds rather do nothing, but look at the real yield really buttressed down to new, greater negative lows.
Yeah, and the question is whether we can continue to increase inflation expectations. I'm really struck by this question. If fundamentals still matter, are fundamentals as good as these record highs on stocks and these incredible valuations that are the highest in decades? Are they still really worth it, given the fact that we still have the hangover effects and the pandemic isn't over, Tom?
Well, the pandemic's not over, and the uncertainties there as well. But Lisa, I've got to admit, Washington is front and center over the next 48, maybe 72 hours.
What are you watching most closely, Tom?
Oh, you got to watch the Georgia elections. There's all sorts of other, transitional stuff, but Lisa, you got to watch the Georgia elections.
Absolutely.
Let us continue here. We do this with futures up 17, Dow futures up 145, all these bursting through to new records. We'll see how we trade later. The VIX, as Stuart Kaiser said, the VIX ought to be at 19. It's not. It's at 23.14. Coming up, we drive forward this discussion on the markets. Sabrata Rajappa joins us from Societe Generale. Stay with us. Washington awakes. Maybe Kevin Cirilli's awake too. This is Bloomberg. Maybe. Good morning.
With the First Word News, I'm Rishika Gupta. It was an extraordinary attempt by President Trump to strong-arm fellow Republicans. In a telephone call Saturday, the president urged Georgia election officials to find thousands of votes and recalculate the result to flip the state to him. A recording of the call shows the president ranged from flattery to threats as he urged officials to take action. Some Democrats are calling President Trump's call impeachable. The White House isn't commenting. Nancy Pelosi will once again be the Speaker of the House. She was selected with 216 votes, just 2 more than a majority of those present. There was talk from the progressive and moderate wings of Pelosi's Democratic Party of the need for change, but no Democrat challenged her. Pelosi begins a new session of Congress with a smaller majority than in the last term. And a British judge has blocked the extradition of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to the US. The judge said the move would be oppressive because of Assange's health. US lawyers say they will appeal. Assange faces criminal charges in the US over WikiLeaks' publication of leaked military and diplomatic documents a decade ago. And the OPEC Plus alliance meets today to decide whether it can keep lifting output. Oil prices rose for a 4th day despite a surging coronavirus pandemic that's hurt demand. Producers restored 500,000 barrels a day to the market this month. OPEC and its allies will decide what to do about February production levels. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Ritika Gupta. This is Bloomberg. Tom.
Did you know Geico could save you hundreds on car insurance and a whole lot more? So what are you waiting for? Hip-hop group tag team to help you plan dessert?
French vanilla, rocky road, chocolate peanut butter cookie dough. Scoop, there it is. Scoop, there it is. Scoop, there it is. Scoop, there it is. Scoop, shakalaka, 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 shaka. Scoop, shakalaka, shakalaka, shakalaka.
Geico. Switch today and see all the ways you could save.
When you need hot or cold therapy for strained or injured muscles, don't give up your freedom to get your therapy. Get that healing feeling with CopperFit Mobile Rapid Relief Wraps. Hot or cold therapy wraps that strap in place and stay in place so you can do what you want while getting the therapy you need.
This is the best solution for icing and heating that I've ever found.
Get that healing feeling with CopperFit Rapid Relief Wraps. Find the entire line of CopperFit Rapid Relief Mobile Wraps now in Walmart Pharmacy.
Today, you are going to become a cook. So how do we do it? Let's just follow the directions. It's like a life hack. I can't believe we made it. It's really good.
Hit refresh with HelloFresh. Go to HelloFresh.com and use code TV10 for 10 free meals, including free.
Guys, are you done with 2020 and all the baggage that came along with it? Ready for a new you in the new year? Start fresh and lose the weight with Nutrisystem for Men.
Everything's planned out. My breakfast, my snacks, my lunch, my dinner.
You don't have to worry about cooking.
The food is delivered right to my door.
That was the old me. This is the new me.
That was the old me. This is the new me.
Old me. New me.
Lose up to 18 pounds in your first month. Lose weight fast. Money back guarantee. Stop looking back. Put 2020 in the rearview mirror and call Nutrisystem for Men today.
I just ate the food, lost the weight.
The food will be at your door in a week, and you could be losing weight the next day.
I don't know who that guy was, but this is me right here.
Call America's #1 home delivery weight loss program.
This is the new me after Nutrisystem.
Act now and save 50% off a month of food and 50% off a month of shakes.
Go online or call 877-494-FIT8 to save 50% on a month of food and shakes.
I've been using Persona for about 5 to 6 months now.
Health is very important to myself and to my family.
There was just not a vitamin that could cover all the bases.
And then I started seeing the commercials for Persona.
And they prescribe everything for what you need.
I hear a doorbell ring, and there's my nice little box.
Everything's personalized, it's easy. The sleep that I'm getting is the best sleep I've had in 10 years.
Persona has helped me get my life back on track.
Learn what your body needs at PersonaNutrition.com.
this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which
market that over the past few weeks has made it clear it wants to go higher. It got a little spooked by the idea that geopolitical tensions are rising.
I think what we've seen during this period of time is that communicating via video is not a fad, that we are using it in all aspects of our lives, for work, for learning, for communicating, for staying in touch.
A mistrusting electorate has said that Senator Thune will now be primaried. So it's a very contentious, volatile situation right now in the Republican Party.
Meanwhile, over in Georgia, we have Loeffler and Perdue, the both Republican incumbents that are being up for re-election here, not really weighing in so much on the Wednesday certification of the Electoral College, where there is opposition among some Republicans. How much clout does this effort have with voters?
Significant clout. And in fact, Senators Loeffler as well as Perdue, both having to navigate in the closing days of this race, in addition to the certification, also the pandemic. Senator Perdue having had to quarantine after being exposed to COVID-19. Beyond that, you've seen top Republicans, top Democrats from the upper echelons of the party both lay down their campaign markers in the Peach State, and really, quite honestly, from a clarity perspective, we might not have a result similar to the November elections. We might not have a result tomorrow night when the votes are ultimately being still counted. I bring that up because for those who are looking for a clean narrative, as Tom Keene has educated me, you might not get those results until a couple of days after.
I'm shocked. We're not going to get a clean narrative out of a recent election. I mean, really, this is my shocked face. I do want to know, though, how much oxygen is being taken out of the room with all of these post-election debates from dealing with the pandemic, the rollout of the vaccines.
You know, candidly, it's been ever since the $900 billion stimulus has come to fruition. There hasn't been much policy discussion in the past several days. I think that two things: everyone's looking to see what getting through the certification of the results on Wednesday, and also looking for there to be some type of result and some clarity to be gleaned from Georgia as well.
Kevin, all of this centers around the immediate politics. What is the politics of the House of Representatives in the first weeks of 2021?
How will Speaker Pelosi govern, and with the rising left flank?
Is she as fragile as John Boehner?
It's not a question of fragility. I would pose it's more of a question of how long does a speakership tenure frequently last? This is someone in Speaker Pelosi who has beat the political odds and reclaimed the gavel, which is historic in and of itself. And so from that perspective, she is a bit of a political anomaly. But beyond that, Tom, the question of how many years her speakership will last is and which next incoming generation, not even necessarily from an age perspective, but from a factions perspective, is being now openly discussed.
Given her power, her reelection, and if the Democrats do take the Senate, what are the likelihoods that you see, the chances of an infrastructure bill getting passed later this year?
You know, I think that the next round of stimulus, if it was juxtaposed with a national security element pertaining to 5G technology, as well as from talking again about those stimulus checks, I think that the Democrats could be able to find a sympathetic ear in some of the more moderate members of the Republican Party, like Senator Susan Collins and those types of lawmakers. But again, Senator Josh Hawley raised the prospect of being able to support $2,000 stimulus checks. And I bring that up because he is also jockeying for some 2024 positioning. And still, I want to start this year by noting this. President-elect Biden, when will he announce whether or not he will seek a second term? That is also a question that could have to be answered in the next 12 months.
I mean, next 12 months, come on. At his, age, that would be, I think, a shock to consensus right now, Kevin. Does he want to get out front and say that earlier than later?
But so that is still a question, because until he makes a declarative statement in the next 12 to 15 months, the Democrats, we're talking right now about 2024 jockeying amongst Republicans, but he is still frozen the Democratic Party from being able to explore which direction they would like to head into.
Kevin, you did a very good report there, considering the 4-11 Eagles season is over. I thought maybe you'd take January off.
What do they tell me? What do they tell me? There's always next year.
There's always next year. They'll be saying that in Washington all through January as well. Kevin Cirilli, our chief Washington correspondent there. I look at this, Lisa, and the distraction, and we got to remember, futures up 17, Dow futures up 147. Look at these levels, Lisa, 37.65 on SPX. I just did that for Faro. I really don't care. The Dow, 30,000. We're on a 31,000 watch on the Dow.
Yeah, I'm really glad that John Farrow is watching you quote Dow points. It really always warms his heart. I will say all of the noise that we're hearing in Washington doesn't seem to matter. The noise that we're hearing out of hospitals having issues getting the vaccine out. Only 1.3% of the U.S. population, Tom, has been vaccinated so far. Just as a comparison, Israel has gotten 12% of its population vaccinated, but people don't care.
Yeah, our Manus Cranny was some real important work on that. Look for Manus Cranny in his reporting on Israel's success at vaccination. Coming up on rates, Lisa demands we talk to Sobrado Rajapa.
Absolutely.
Of SocGen. No question about that. Stay with us on radio, on television. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Pieces in your portfolio to preserve capital, diversify to mitigate risk, provide liquidity while delivering returns. Gold, your strategic advantage.
Carvana, the company who invented car vending machines and buying a car 100% online. Now we've created a brand new way for you to sell your car. Whether it's a year old or a few years old, we want to buy your car. So go to Carvana and enter your license plate, answer a few questions, and our techno wizardry calculates your car's value and gives you a real offer in seconds. When you're ready, we'll come to you, pay you on the spot, and pick up your car. That's it. So ditch the old way of selling your car and say hello to the new way at Carvana.
A logo can do more than identify your company. It can connect in meaningful ways, energize your team, and inspire your customers. We're 4imprint, and we know your logo on the right product can create moments that matter. With 30 years of experience and thousands of products to choose from, we guarantee your order will be right the first time, on time, and for a great price. Be certain that the right moments will matter. Explore thousands of promotional products at 4imprint.com. 4imprint, for certain.
This is more than a mirror. This is a portal to your future.
And bring it. Come on!
Introducing the all-new Vault from Nordic Track.
Total body strength.
The Vault is a personal trainer in your home. But where the Vault has no rival is it's a complete gym, hiding in plain sight.
Step in the super band.
The best trainers in the world.
More resistance.
Giving you the exact workout you want.
More strength.
When you want it. Open something extraordinary. Get yours only at NordicTrack.com.
This is Kate.
Hey.
She takes 2 prescriptions. Kate's son Jack takes 1 too. Kate works hard and thought she had good insurance. But she still pays too much. That's no good. So Kate downloaded the
sense of the real-time action, the 10-year yield tumbling now 11 basis points, so continuing in this knee-jerk risk-off feel.
I'm David Weston. Bloomberg Television is reinventing one of the most iconic brands in financial television for a new audience. Join me to see the news program for the clever investor. This is Bloomberg Wall Street Week.
Some well-deserved time off. We're going to get to a really important rates discussion, but Lisa, we've really got to talk about these markets with futures out, all of the futures out to record highs as a general statement. As Stuart Kaiser said, the VIX doesn't come in 2309. But Lisa, where I see it is on the borders with Mexico and particularly dollar Canada coming into 126.85, strong Trudeau dollar. And also, renminbi, Lisa, has a life of its own.
Yeah, this idea of dollar weakness really being driven, at least in the emerging market currencies, by the strength that we're seeing in the Chinese currency. And there's a question of how long the dollar weakness can persist given the consensus trade among many consensus trades this year. But talking about bonds, we're not really seeing much action. And it's sort of notable given the fact that we're seeing stocks making new highs every single day. Subhadra Rajappa has been looking at this as well. Societe Generale, head of U.S. rate strategy. Subhadra, what's your sense of what the bond market is saying, remaining so steady, even as we get this risk-on feel that just keeps gaining steam?
Oh, we'll get a lot of movement this week when we get the data. Broadly speaking, I think what the market's focused on is sort of near-term pain versus long-term gain. I think the equity market's much more focused on the long term, and the bond market is more focused on the near term. And I think the near term data is going to show a decent amount of weakness going into the fourth quarter. We're going to get weaker, probably the weakest unemployment report since May. We're probably going to see weakness in the ISM manufacturing data. And the Fed minutes are going to also remain somewhat dovish. So I think the data this week is going to sort of disappoint. The question is whether the bond market will look past that.
Oh, let's unpack some of that. This idea of the bond market looking past weakness, but you're saying the bond market has been more worried about that weakness than, say, stocks. What would we have to see in the data to see a real move in bonds, and what would that real move look like?
So I think that the move in bonds is going to come after we see the vaccines being deployed and the data gets a little bit more stable. The data as of now, I mean, the employment data as well as Q4 data is backward looking. So the question really becomes what's going to change the data over the near term, and I don't really see anything much. So I think over the next month or month and a half, or even beyond that, I think bonds are going to remain somewhat range bound. Really, the rise in yields is going to come in the second half when we start seeing an improvement in mobility rates, broadly speaking, as well as an improvement in the data and when things come back online.
So from a range-bound nominal yield to dynamic inflation expectations to the residual, the real rate, where is the opportunity now within that equation?
So that's a very interesting question because we've seen a decent rise in inflation expectations after the elections, partly because of exuberance, partly because of the fact that there was always an expectation that at least $1 trillion in stimulus would get passed by the end of the year. So that's caused inflation expectations to rise. 10-year break-evens are close to 2% or 200 basis points, and real yields have declined. So the question really becomes is if realized inflation will also rise in tandem with the rise in inflation expectations. And that's really where I think the struggle is going to be, because the Fed's expecting core PCE to rise to 1.8%, but that rise in realized inflation is going to be somewhat gradual, and I think that that's going to ultimately cap the rise in inflation expectations.
Are stocks a yield? This is outside your remit, but I think it's a fair question in January of this year. Are dividends and dividend growth a yield equivalent to someone like you?
Well, perhaps, but I think that the stocks are sort of trading in a very different dynamic. And yes, as long as nominal yields are low, let's say the 10-year yields is around 1%, maybe that's a positive for equities. But I see a case for nominal yields to gradually rise during the course of this year, given the fact that, as fundamentals improve, let's say that the unemployment rate does get to 5% by the end of the year, which is what the summary of economic projections are calling for, then you should expect a gradual rise in yields, and that should sort of offset some of the gains or comparisons with dividend yields in equities.
It's hard to think about shoulds in an era where cash is supreme and there is so much of it. I don't want to say on the sidelines because people are going to hammer me, but on the sidelines, I think $4.3 trillion, you were saying, in money market funds that could be deployed. How much can yields really rise in this kind of environment?
So our call is for 10-year yields to get to 1.5% by the end of the year. And you're absolutely right. There's a lot of cash on the sidelines. You have the 4.3 trillion in money market fund AUMs. You have, very large amount of excess reserves, and savings rates are also quite high. So there's a lot of pent-up demand, I would say, from consumers, and that money is going to find its way back into the market once we get past the first half and vaccinations actually take effect. So I think that there's a good case to be made for yields to rise. We think the 10-year yields get to 1.5% by the end of the year, but I think the risks are to even higher yields. So in our bear case, we have 10s getting to 2%. And in our bull case, if the vaccines, for some reason, if there's issues with them, then we probably stay in the context of where yields are right now. But I think higher than 1.5% is very possible in the second half.
Does the Fed get involved, Subhadra, if we do get yields that shoot up to 1.5%?
I don't see the need for the Fed to get involved unless the rise in yields is unruly. I think if it's gradual, if you sort of go from 1 to 1.25 to 1.5 over the course of the year, then that should give the Fed no reason to worry. So I think what they will do under the circumstances is perhaps think about gradually tapering asset purchases somewhere maybe after the first half of the year. So as not to panic the markets, as well as sort of gradually remove stimulus so that yields can gradually rise.
Subhadra, it has been an extraordinary bull market for bonds. The shock of 2009, I believe it was 2012, we saw another total return ramp. There's always a rationalization of total return in bonds. Are you telling SocGen clients, institutional and retail clients, that total return is still part of the game? With the pricing that we're at, can we think total return?
Well, I think bond indices are going to underperform in 2021, which is kind of a consensus view. The question is to what extent and how underweight you want to be relative to the index. And that's really where I think the difficulty comes, is at how much the big unknown is how much will the Fed intervene if yields actually rise. But I think that the broad consensus is that bonds will underperform.
If you're just joining us on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, Subhadra Japa with us with Societe Generale. As we look at the rate market, we'll also look at equities today. Futures up 18, Dow futures up 154. Yields fairly quiescent all in all, 0.93 on the 10-year yield. Subhadra, if I look at the bond market, and I compare it to the competition that's out there, it seems to be so competitive, and you've got monetary and fiscal dynamics, as Lisa mentioned, as well. Is your space, like, what's the greatest uncertainty for you in the actual calls that you're making at SocGen?
Well, I think the uncertainty comes from perhaps what happens tomorrow in the elections, in the Georgia runoffs. I think that could really tilt the table. Perhaps if the Democrats win, we could see more fiscal spending. But broadly speaking, the uncertainty is going to come from perhaps if vaccines get deployed a lot sooner than expected and they're effective, and we start seeing an increase in mobility rates a lot faster, that rise in yields could come a lot sooner than people expect. So there's a little bit of complacency, I would say, in the bond market, sort of here and now looking at the data. But the risk is that things start to pick up a lot sooner than people anticipate, and that could cause a rise in yields sooner than people expect.
Yeah, really well said. Lisa, I just think it's so interesting to see this sophisticated talk about bonds, and it still comes back to Washington.
Yeah, it still comes back to whether or not we get some sort of stimulus that could juice growth. I do think, though, given how much optimism we're hearing today, I do want to just put on a Debbie Downer hat, just because it's the new year. And Tom, I feel like we have to at least just get some of the contrarian take here, because no one else is doing it. But in the bond market, just taking a look at credit, right now, high yield bond yields, 4.18%. We could see a sub 4% yield, all in inclusive yield, on bonds of companies that are the closest to default. And Subhadra, how much of a concern is this? The idea that nobody is taking into account at this point credit risk, because there is a belief in this recovery, there is a belief in Fed and fiscal support, and there is a belief that defaults just won't matter.
Well, I think here the Fed is very much in play. I think the backstop provided by the two credit facilities, I think, has caused corporate bond spreads to narrow quite meaningfully during the course of 2020. And I think that there's always a presumption in the corporate bond market that the Fed will step in if there's any sort of rise in defaults. But let's be fair. I mean, defaults have been rising and are pretty much in line with defaults we saw back in 2009. So really, the Fed backstop here plays a very important role, and the Fed is ready to step in if needed. And that's really where the confidence in the corporate bond market comes from.
Subhadra, thank you so much for giving.
We have some good news in terms of vaccines and a chance to overcome the health crisis, but we are not there yet.
We need the fiscal stimulus, and we need it relatively quickly, because I can see where the second wave's coming. You can see consumer spending beginning to get impacted again.
What we need surveillance to be stronger. We need public health measures, because you have no other way at the beginning. This is your best weapon, and you need to use it well.
The good news is that both the vaccines and the therapeutics, in particular the antibodies, are coming along and will start to bring that number way down.
We don't just need more investment in public health. We must also rethink how we value health.
I do believe a targeted fiscal stimulus is going to be in order to really begin a more equalized economy.
pleaded with Georgia election officials to find thousands of votes and change the state's election result. That comes from a recording of an extraordinary phone call that took place over the weekend. The president ranged from flattery to threats during the course of the conversation, but the Georgia officials didn't back down. The White House isn't commenting. Nancy Pelosi will have a smaller Democratic majority as she begins another term as Speaker of the House. Pelosi was re-elected to the post with 216 votes. That's just 2 more than a majority of those present. There was talk that progressive and moderate Democrats wanted a new generation of leadership, but no Democrat decided to challenge Pelosi. In Israel, the country's health minister has set out an ambitious coronavirus vaccination plan. He spoke with Bloomberg TV.
Judging by the wonderful response of the population and the efficiency of the medical teams here, we can get probably to 70–80% of those eligible to get the vaccine somewhere, I believe, in April, May. I think that we are getting there and we are not going to slow down.
Israel has already administered first doses of the Pfizer shot to about 1.2 million residents, or more than 12% of its population. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Ritika Gupta. This is Bloomberg.
If you're living with credit card debt, things can feel a little off balance, but payoff.com can help. Let's take the first step together. Payoff.com. Pay off your credit cards and get your balance back.
When you need hot or cold therapy for strained or injured muscles, don't give up your freedom to get your therapy. Get that healing feeling with CopperFit Mobile Rapid Relief Wraps. Hot or cold therapy wraps that strap in place and stay in place so you can do what you want while getting the therapy you need.
This is the best solution for icing and heating that I've ever found.
Get that healing feeling with CopperFit Rapid Relief Wraps. Find the entire line of CopperFit Rapid Relief Mobile Wraps now in Walmart Pharmacy.
Learn to play piano with the #1 rated app co-created by Grammy Award-winning legend Quincy Jones.
With this technology, we can now give millions all over the world access to playing music who otherwise wouldn't even try.
Playground Sessions is perfect for beginners of all ages or players looking to expand their keyboard knowledge. It guarantees you'll improve every time you play, even if you've never played piano before.
For seniors and baby boomers, this could give them a renewed purpose and excitement because the program is laid out so simply.
You get over 1,000 songs to choose from.
Playground is a great tool for anyone who's looking to learn the piano or keyboard from the comfort of their own home.
Log on to playgroundsessions.com now. Your package includes 1 year of unlimited access to hundreds of piano lessons at all levels and over 1,000 song choices. You'll also get a pro-quality keyboard package that has everything you need to play the songs you love. You save over 50% through this exclusive offer. Go to playgroundsessions.com.
Whoa, it tastes just like watermelon.
Whoa, it tastes just like watermelon.
Watermelon! Watermelon!
For a limited time, new customers can get 36 bottles for only $36. That's only $1 per bottle. Go to drinkhint.com and we'll ship it direct to your door for free. We'll also include a free gift. Hint, it's water with a touch of true fruit flavor.
You came to slay this Peloton. Get a little savage with it.
Thrusters till the beat drops. Come on, Peloton. Push through.
They can't stop you. They can't break you.
I know it hurts. You're almost there.
Say it with me. I crushed that.
At-home motivation, anytime you want it.
Your grooming business is booming. You need to hire.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. The moment you sponsor a job on Indeed, you get a short list of quality candidates from our resume database. Claim your $75 credit when you post your first job at Indeed.com/groomer.
For HelloFresh over any other meal kit because the variety in these boxes and the quality of the food totally exceeds any other meal kit company I've ever tried. I love it.
Hit refresh with HelloFresh. Use code TV10 for 10 free meals, including free shipping.
We are not where we want to be, no doubt about that. But I think we can get there if we really accelerate, get some momentum going, and see what happens as we get into the first couple of weeks of January.
Dr. Fauci with ABC this week. Good to hear that. He will be joining the Biden administration as well. The vaccine was the talk of the weekend, certainly here in New York City. It is tangible. No, not back to March and April, maybe back to June. I'll let the experts decide that. But you can feel it in the city, the immediacy and frustration. When do I get vaccinated? We do that with the markets lifting this morning, futures up 16. We'll leave that currency's dollar weaker as well. But right now, not in the political questions of the moment, but that vaccine question that we all have. Dr. Fazili joins us. Sam Fazili is Bloomberg Intelligence, head of pharmacology, and so much of what we run as well. Sam, you stunned me with a France-Israel distinction. The idea that Israel has been a huge success and France has been beyond tentative with, I believe, 500 plus vaccinations so far. What is the distinctions between those two nations' approach that we can learn from?
Yeah, good morning, Tom. So I have to say that I'm obviously a lot closer to the French story than the Israeli story. And in France, it seems to be bureaucracy and getting the paperwork done. You know, I spoke to my local GP or family doctor, and he needs to see me whenever I come up for a vaccine. Before I go in for my vaccine, so that's 2 visits, twice for my 2 doses. So I need to have 4 visits, and I have to give consent and fill out paperwork each time. Maybe that's what the French deemed necessary to get their public to comply, but does it matter if the public comply at this pace?
Sam, at this pace isn't going to get it done. We heard Dr. Fauci say that. Some of us have the collective memory of lining up with mothers in tears, you know, in our corduroys and our PF flyers, and they just threw the polio drops at us and said, shut up and take this. Why have we lost that spirit?
Yeah, I think some of it has to do with the good steps that we've taken in giving people more freedom of choice and less centralized, driven, you got to do this or else. But we're dealing with a situation where if we don't deal with it faster, what my personal activity does in terms of potentially passing the virus to somebody else is impacting other people's freedom and rights, and that's not right either. So we have to get a good balance on this.
I will.
It's really a reminder, isn't it, just how sensitive the markets are to any commentary about trade. We did see some pressure on the yuan, we did see some pressure on the futures. That is now being reversed.
This is Bloomberg Best, your weekly review of the most important business news, analysis, and interviews from Bloomberg Television around the world.
Ken Burns, welcome to Bloomberg Big Decisions.
We have always been a mixture of things. We are always stronger for that mixture.
Growth is a way to stay competitive, delight more and more consumers.
Are you worried that people won't take the vaccine?
We remain concerned about vaccine hesitancy.
What is one word of advice you'll take with you?
Learn how to listen. And that is certainly something that has served me well.
Ankiti, where do you go from here? It's a huge market. It's a huge opportunity. I want to go 100x from here.
Our philosophy is to partner where we can and stand apart when we should.
Valuations, particularly, sort of the technology landscape, have gotten to some pretty extraordinary levels. So I think it's not a surprise. I don't think it's any indication of the beginning of the end, but I do think markets don't like uncertainty.
Sam Fazili synthesize the hospitalization statistics worldwide?
Yeah, I think it's, unfortunately, Tom, it's not just the US New York story. We've got some hospitals in the UK, in London, for example, that are totally at capacity. You just have to follow Twitter and some of the local doctors to see that. Germany is showing similar kind of directions going, although they have a lot more ICU beds for people than per capita. France, maybe, but at least these two countries have managed to keep the rate of infection rise under control. The UK is what worries me a lot.
Well, Sam, I look at this forward, and I want you to lay out for us, with all your expertise in pharmacology and such, tell our listeners and viewers what they should expect across the next 8 weeks. How do we get to March 1st?
Yes, unfortunately, I think it's going to be more pressure on keeping people away from each other. For want of a better phrase, maybe we shouldn't use lockdowns anymore. Keep people away from each other so that the virus can't mutate, can't continue to transmit. I think we're going to see rising cases in the UK unless we get that severe lockdown. And unfortunately, I think we're going to see some numbers looking pretty ugly in the US too, because we're just coming out of Christmas and New Year.
One of our best resources on sound science in this pandemic, Sam Fazili of Bloomberg Intelligence. Thank you so much. You know, Lisa, we digress to these other stories as well, but we really need to get back to markets. They ended strong, and they begin this year strong again.
Yeah, strongest they've ever been if you look at just sheer valuations. And I just am wondering how much we're baking in and how much people are looking past the economic pain that could come from what Sam is talking about, these virus counts.
I haven't added up the top 6-7 companies, but, you know, I just came in, and since I'm all cash, triple leverage, all cash, you look up Apple, $2.3 trillion market cap. I mean, at some point this year, are we looking at $3 trillion market cap for Apple? You wonder.
Well, Apple is a mainstay for a lot of people. My question is the Carnival Cruise Line, Norwegian cruise liners. Some of these more speculative companies right now, given the fact that they can't do anything because nobody's traveling, how much runway do they have if we don't get an end to the pandemic, until August, until September? And sort of how much is that being priced in given the delay in the rollout of these vaccines? I don't know. It doesn't seem like anyone's really thinking about that, Tom.
And at least the heart of the matter here is the rotation to small caps and somewhat international as well. You wonder those dollar dynamics and what it means for international investment in the first quarter.
Yeah. What's interesting is actually because of the euro strength, some people were suggesting that perhaps you'd see a rotation out of European stocks, that this would potentially hamper earnings. Yeah. You're not seeing that. And so some of these currency dynamics that traditionally have held true aren't necessarily playing out because, frankly, it's just risk on and finding the areas that haven't been bid up the most, Tom.
Well, to round it up, 123 on euro, dollar, sterling, dollar, the cable, 137 to round it up. I'm getting ahead of myself there, not quite 137. Strong Canadian dollar, and really China front and center. A jump condition on China to a very, very strong level, 6.47 yuan per dollar. David Riley, Blue Bay Asset Management, as we continue to greet the markets in 2021 on radio, on TV. This is Bloomberg.
Meet Tonal, the smartest home gym that learns as you get stronger with personalized expert coaching and revolutionary digital way, so you can be your strongest. Visit tonal.com.
You need the right pieces in your portfolio to preserve capital, diversify to mitigate risk, provide liquidity, while delivering returns. Gold, your strategic advantage.
We live in a world of fees. Airlines, hotels, food delivery, and especially car dealers all charge excessive last-minute fees. When you want something badly enough, it feels like your only choice is to pay up. But what if you had a choice to take a stand instead? At Carvana, we believe in treating you better. With zero hidden fees, you can drive off without feeling ripped off. That's what it means to live feelessly.
Open the door, your food is here. Introducing the all-new Nutrisystem for Men, a plan made for a man's unique metabolism.
followed my plan, I lost the weight.
Meals and shakes from your door to your plate.
I got all my favorite foods and foods.
Burgers, pizza, it's all so good.
There's even a money-back guarantee.
Start losing weight, keep losing it, and learn how to keep it off with 50% off a month of meals and 50% off a month of shakes. It's easy when the food comes to you.
Don't feel like cooking? You don't have to.
Just heat and eat.
This is your new plan. Ridiculously uncomplicated with foods you love.
Explore the trends, investments, and competition of the European ETF industry. Join us on Bloomberg ETF IQ Europe.
Could be a little patchy in January, but I think once we get to June, we're going to be in a much better shape.
Economically speaking, it's going to start out on a more somber note.
There will be enormous gains in productivity.
Absolutely. I think inflation is coming back in 21.
There will be some form of simmering, slow inflation.
You could have an economic recovery and not necessarily a stock market recovery.
We all knew winter was coming, but you've got all the bears in hibernation right now.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio and Television. Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz. John Farrow off on a well-deserved vacation. Tom, we have gotten complaints from viewers about the good morning, the lack of the British accent. I'm not going to disrespect the British language by trying to have the accent, but we can give you good morning. Good morning. We are seeing that incredible enthusiasm persist, Tom, into the new year, despite the fact that we've gotten some pretty sobering data out of the vaccination schedule and despite some of the ongoing political uncertainty.
Well, it's the way it was all through the back half of the year. I'm going to go back here, Lisa, to the great missed calls of 3 years at Tower Hudson. Ben Laidler reaffirms a double-digit gain for 2021 on the markets. And just think of the 47 reasons not to be on board. And you see it again today, everything out to record highs. The NASDAQ is going to be a 13,000 level here, NASDAQ 100, with another lift in the market.
On the flip side, and this is something that's interesting, despite the enthusiasm that you're seeing in the S&P and the NASDAQ and the absolute headline numbers, the Russell 2000 not at record highs. It is off of its highs, and it's actually dipping a little bit if you take a look at futures, which is interesting. The rotation trade, will it remain on if you continue to get the kinds of numbers that we're getting out of the pandemic?
And not only that, Lisa, but the rotation trade also that was believed out of tech over to all these other sectors. I mean, does tech walk away in 2021 and actually underperformed. That's a huge mystery as well. Lisa, run through some data that you see right now.
Right now, we are seeing, as you said, record highs on the S&P. S&P up about 0.2%, 3766. I'm not going to quote the Dow. I will let you do that. But what you're seeing is dollar weakness, and this is actually pervasive across the markets. You're seeing the emerging markets complex at record highs, and the euro gaining 123. 10-year yields doing nothing, and crude actually dipping a little bit ahead of that OPEC Plus meeting that we're seeing, Tom, that starts today.
Mexican peso to new strength, not record. I'd also note loonie, really, really important to look at dollar Canada. My eyes are failing me right now on the Bloomberg there. 126.97 on dollar Canada. That's a shock. Really interesting for the commodity-based Canadian experiment. Right now in Atlanta, she is at Centennial Park in downtown, of course, the Olympic site of 1996, and Emily Wilkins is studying a Georgia that is stunningly different than those Olympics of 1996. Emily, I was reading about Gwinnett County today, reading about just the sheer shock that this is not Newt Gingrich's Atlanta, is it?
Absolutely not, Tom. I mean, we've seen two major things happen in Atlanta and across Georgia. Number one, simply the demographics of the population have changed. We've seen more Hispanics come to Georgia, more Asian Americans come to Georgia, more blacks who are living in Georgia. And we've also seen a lot of them become more politically active over this last decade. There has been a strong, concentrated campaign to really register people and turn them out to vote. We saw the results of that back in November, and it will remain to see what results we're going to see coming forward in tomorrow's runoff election.
Emily, the voters who turn out on election day, do they tend to be Republican or Democratic, and how are people expecting the turnout on that capacity?
That's a great question. So normally for a runoff like this, Republicans are kind of seen as having the advantage. They tend to be good at turning out in big numbers for special elections like this one. However, all over Georgia, there is a strong concerted push on both sides to really turn people out. Turnout is the name of the game. And we've already seen some fairly strong numbers. 3 million Georgians have already cast their votes in this election, either through early voting or absentee.
Well, yeah, but one final question, Emily, before you start your Georgia day into a long Tuesday evening with David Weston and Kevin Cirilli. What's the turnout in the write-in vote, the pre-voting, versus what we saw November 3rd?
We are surprised. A lot of people in Georgia are surprised at how many people have gone ahead and voted early. I don't think people are expecting the numbers to be quite this high. We're also seeing a number of people who have voted early who did not vote in the November 3rd election. So these are people who got engaged, got registered, and have cast their ballots when they were not able to do so just a month ago.
Our Emily Wilkins in Atlanta, and of course there for the next few days. David Weston leading our coverage there tomorrow. Right now in the markets, David Riley, Blue Bay Asset Management, joins us, of a huge value to us through 2020. We'll see if he can straggle forward and do it again for us in 2021. David, how was your 2020? What a strange year.
It was an absolutely extraordinary year, and it does feel a little bit like, as you say, Tom, sort of struggling into 2021. I have to say, if you told me the foresight around the pandemic, the deepest global recession, arguably for 100 years, that the markets would perform as strongly as they have done, I would not have believed you. But there we go. But I'm pleased to say that we've had a reasonable 2020 and sort of looking forward to 21 with a reasonable degree of optimism.
David, is the rotation out of tech stocks, out of the stocks that have performed the best and into some of the cyclicals and some of the more beaten up areas, is it still on?
Yeah, I think it still is on, but I think to the point that you've been making, Lisa, that one of the kind of key parts of that whole sort of rotation and reflation theme is what happens to core rates and particularly US rates and Treasury yields. And they haven't really been moving. And I think so long as they remain very well anchored, then actually it's kind of hard to see why some of those outperforming sectors, particularly US tech, which is a kind of long duration growth asset, is going to sort of meaningfully underperform. So I think for that leg of the rotation, I do think that you need to see higher Treasury yields. And at the moment, that's the dog that's not barking.
In other words, it will take higher inflation to disrupt the leadership that we've seen so far. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Well, certainly the Fed, at its last meeting, once again signaled very strongly that it has, it's not even thinking about raising rates. So certainly inflation is one of those, a shift in inflation expectations, one of those things that could shift yields higher. But of course, it's also what would happen in Washington, whether we got additional fiscal stimulus in the event that the Democratic candidates win the Georgia Senate elections tomorrow.
David, Chris Ferrone publishes moments ago with Strategas, and he looks at a market that went through the lower lows this year and then closed in 2020 at higher highs. It's happened 4 times in 90 years. Is the greatest missed call this year that we get a lassitude in the markets, that we get a range-bound feel? Is that what we're missing?
Potentially. I mean, I don't think that. I mean,
David Riley, thank you so much for your help at Bloomberg Surveillance this year. Greatly, greatly appreciated. Into 2021 with a gentleman from Blue Bay Asset Management. Lisa, I went to the Bloomberg terminal. I did a fancy moving average study. I'm not going to go into the details, but I've got yuan appreciation over 8%. 8% is big figures from that above 7 level down to 6.46. That is tangible.
Yeah, and there's a question of when the PBOC, or when the People's Bank of China will step in and see this as a problem. So far, they've taken pretty tepid action, particularly because versus the euro, there's been some consistency with the yuan, but really notable. I got to say, Tom, really, we're watching that dollar weakness.
We're watching on ADXY. Michael Purvis, I know, at Telbakken was really quite good on that, the strong Asian index that we've seen recently. Futures up 17, Dow futures up 144. Lisa Bramowitz's bond market dead in the water.
Yeah.
I mean, 0.93% on 10-year yield. I mean, it's really done nothing, right?
Well, and this actually, you asked a fantastic question earlier, I will say, Tom. I'm going to start the year off well, and you did, with this question of whether stocks are increasingly a proxy for bonds. And it was really interesting to hear David Riley talk about how as long as yields remain low, how can you get out of tech stocks, right? I mean, that's going to be the discussion.
A Credit Suisse call I know as well, a huge point there of do tech or do not do tech. That'll be one of our themes through January. Coming up, the themes of politics in the nation. Julie Norman joins from UCL. Stay with us with futures up 18 on radio and television. This is Bloomberg.
With the First Word News, I'm Rishika Gupta. It was an extraordinary attempt by President Trump to strong-arm fellow Republicans. In a telephone call Saturday, the president urged Georgia election officials to find thousands of votes and recalculate the result to flip the state to him. A recording of the call shows the president ranged from flattery to threats as he urged officials to take action. Some Democrats are calling President Trump's call impeachable. The White House isn't commenting. Nancy Pelosi will once again be the Speaker of the House. She was selected with 216 votes, just 2 more than a majority of those present. There was talk from the progressive and moderate wings of Pelosi's Democratic Party of the need for change, but no Democrat challenged her. Pelosi begins the new session of Congress with a smaller majority than in the last term. A British judge has blocked the extradition of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to the US. The judge said the move would be oppressive because of Assange's health. US lawyers say they will appeal. Assange faces criminal charges in the US over WikiLeaks' publication of leaked military and diplomatic documents a decade ago. And Bitcoin pulled back today after a spectacular rally. The world's largest cryptocurrency fell as much as 17%, the most since March. Bitcoin is up more than 300% in the past year. Over the weekend, it went over $34,000 for the first time. Bitcoin supporters argue that it's moving in on gold as a hedge against US dollar weakness and the risk of inflation. Global News 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Rishika Gupta. This is Bloomberg.
Welcome them to the family. We can even help you find the perfect treat or food that makes you both smile. Chewy's got toys, treats, prescriptions, all the things you need to celebrate your new friend, delivered right to your door. Save on all your pet essentials. Visit Chewy.com today.
Learn to play piano with the #1 rated app co-created by Grammy Award-winning legend Quincy Jones.
With this technology, we can now give millions all over the world access to playing music who otherwise wouldn't even try.
Playground Sessions is perfect for beginners of all ages or players looking to expand their keyboard knowledge. It guarantees you'll improve every time you play, even if you've never played piano before.
For seniors and baby boomers, this could give them a renewed purpose and excitement because the program is laid out so simply.
You get over 1,000 songs to choose from.
Playground is a great tool for anyone who's looking to learn the piano or keyboard from the comfort of their own home.
Log on to playgroundsessions.com now. Your package includes 1 year of unlimited access to hundreds of piano lessons at all levels and over 1,000 song choices. You'll also get a pro-quality keyboard package that has everything you need to play the songs you love. You save over 50% through this exclusive offer. Go to playgroundsessions.com.
If you're living with credit card debt, things can feel a little off balance, but payoff.com can help. Let's take the first step together. Payoff.com. Pay off your credit cards and get your balance back.
It's a brand new year, and with HelloFresh, it's 365 days to start fresh, to make some new memories that just might turn into traditions.
Hit refresh with HelloFresh. Use code TV10 for 10 free meals, including free shipping.
One of the biggest challenges we have as parents is finding an outlet or something that your kids enjoy doing with you. And the reason I was looking for components in the home gym like Fight Camp is to just capture some of that precious time. I'll never forget when Fight Camp released Versus mode. My son's 12, and he immediately was like, this weekend, we are going to fight. For me to be able to have something that he really wants to do with Dad, to me, has been the most priceless thing about Fight Camp.
Some of my best memories growing up were cooking with Mom. She always said, food is love. So when she moved in with us, a new kitchen became part of our financial plan.
There was a dream.
I want to make the most of every meal we have together.
At Northwestern Mutual, our version of financial planning helps you live your dreams today.
Find a Northwestern Mutual advisor at nm.com.
Getting healthcare. A big moment for your employees. And a big moment for you. And it all happens thanks to the experts at Paychex. When you track hours for dozens or thousands of employees, the Paychex suite of payroll solutions can handle it all. And when you have better things to do than stay up to date on the latest regulations, Paychex can help with that too. 50 years and thousands of experts in payroll, HR, benefits, and insurance. Sign up today for 1 month free at paychex.com/future.
Look at what has happened on state ballot initiatives, on public referendum, on minimum wage, on voting rights, on healthcare. It is very clear where the country wants to go. The obstacle at this point is the government that continues to put up roadblocks and to prohibit our people from getting there.
He is the former congressman of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Joseph Kennedy, deciding to go after the senatorial ring held by Mr. Markey, and Mr. Markey defeating him in a primary. That was big news up in Massachusetts. We were thrilled that Joe Kennedy could join us this morning as we looked at the top risks of 2021 with Eurasia Group. We thank Dr. Bremer for a really spirited 2 hours with his shop. Right now, to advance the dialogue, Lisa Bramlett and I speak on radio and TV with Julie Norman at UCL in London, a good and distant viewer of American politics as well. Julie Norman, Joe Kennedy paid the price here of going after the more left Senator Markey of Massachusetts. Maybe Joe Kennedy represents a younger middle ground of the Democratic Party, along with President-elect Biden. Marco Rubio having a spirited weekend in Florida as he is reticent to join what are
illustrating the rift that exists there. But again, it's not absent in the Democrats either. I think one takeaway from the election that hasn't been talked about is as much as that the progressive camps did not excel, did not succeed as much as they wanted to, and will be trying to figure out their way forward over these next 4 years also. But this week, the main focus will be on the Republicans.
So you talked about this wild week that we're heading into in Washington, D.C., Julie. Part of this is Wednesday, that is going to be the certification of the Electoral College or not. If some of these dissenting Republicans get their way, it looks highly unlikely. What do you make of the attempt by some of these Republicans, a dozen in the Senate and more in the House, and President Trump to try to challenge or delay the certification of the Electoral College?
Well, Lisa, I think what you said is exactly right. At the most, this will delay the results. It won't actually change it, though we know that Biden will be confirmed and will be inaugurated on January 20th. And what this is that we're seeing is essentially political theater. It's a lot of performance, and especially led by, in particular, the senators who are eyeing a potential presidential run in 2024 and want to either curry favor with President Trump himself or to at least go down as having the support of his base and the electorate that has been following him. And this is really a political game. We've seen Cruz in particular likening it to challenges in the past that really don't correlate in any kind of meaningful way. And this is really just a political maneuver and not one that will really change the results at the end of the day.
Well, maybe so, Julie, but when do political games matter? I was looking at a Washington Post op-ed. All 10 living former secretaries of defense came out and talked about how the military should not get involved and with respect to certifying the next president, and that there should be and has been historically a peaceful transfer of power. From a historical perspective, how concerning is it that these 10 former defense secretaries even had to write this op-ed?
Lisa, it's extremely concerning and notable. And this op-ed, as you noted, is all the current living 10 past defense secretaries, including Dick Cheney up to Esper. And the fact that this group of different political backgrounds, different political ideologies, were also concerned about the current messaging, rhetoric, and potential actions coming out of Washington to write this op-ed, affirming, first of all, the need for respecting the elections and transfer of power, but also quite notably saying the military should not be pulled into this in any kind of way. And just needing to preempt that, and the fact that these individuals thought it was necessary to say that is indeed very notable and concerning.
Julie Norman, our Alex Morales reporting on your London about a pandemic U-turn coming. It seems like Prime Minister Johnson's being incredibly whipsawed here, along with the news flow. We heard earlier about the really critical hospitalization levels within the United Kingdom. How close is Prime Minister Johnson to a pandemic U-turn?
Well, Tom, I think Johnson's already had to make a big U-turn that he didn't want to make. He was hoping to have things opening up again by Christmas, and instead we had the opposite, a increase of the tiers, and are looking now at a potential even further restrictions and lockdown. This is the last thing that Johnson wanted, the last thing that the Conservatives wanted, but he is just responding to what looks to be a pretty dire situation emerging in the UK with this new strand of the virus.
Julie Norman, thank you so much. On American politics, on British politics as well, with UCL. Greatly appreciate that this morning. Lisa, futures up 14, Dow futures up 106. And as you mentioned, Lisa, really the pro focus this morning has to be on the foreign exchange markets.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say Bitcoin.
No, I watched it over the weekend, and, I don't want to go into a big bunch of mathiness right now, but you can't trend a moonshot, Lisa.
That's fantastically put. I love it. You can't trend a moonshot.
There's no math involved here on what is clearly a moonshot. I mean, Matt Miller's large in this over in Berlin. I think he's going to buy like Austria or something.
What is he nailed it with his triple leverage Bitcoin fund? I do think it's amazing how much it's rallied. And today, coming off quite a bit, Tom.
Coming off a bit. I believe the quote, there's 31,000 on Bitcoin. I'm looking for an entry point.
Aren't we all?
23.26 on the VIX, on Bloomberg Radio, on Bloomberg Television. Economics Next, Thomas Kostridge, Bank Pictet. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg.
Nuts.com has something for everyone to love. Incredible nuts, dried fruits, organic snacks, and gluten-free treats.
Best pistachios ever.
Love the dried peaches. Can't stop eating them.
White chocolate toffee cashews are awesome.
So check out Nuts.com.
You need the right pieces in your portfolio to preserve capital, diversify to mitigate risk, provide liquidity, while delivering returns. Gold, your strategic advantage.
So if I made it so easy to pay off my student loan debt,
They were able to give me a personal loan so I could pay off all of my credit cards.
I got my mortgage through SoFi, and the whole process is so easy.
Whoa, it tastes just like watermelon.
Whoa! It tastes just like watermelon!
Watermelon! Watermelon!
For a limited time, new customers can get 36 bottles for only $36. That's only $1 per bottle. Go to drinkhint.com and we'll ship it direct to your door for free. We'll also include a free gift. Hint, it's water with a touch of true fruit flavor.
Every physical store has to have a digital presence.
Fiverr made it easy for us to find the right freelance talent to create the website to tell our story. Now we have a digital storefront that's an extension of our physical one.
Transform your business today. Fiverr.
It's time for the lowest prices of the season on the Sleep Number 360 smart bed.
Can I help with snoring?
I've never heard snoring.
Exactly.
No problem. And done. And now the Queen Sleep Number 360 C2 smart bed is only $8.99. Plus no interest until January 2024. Ends Monday.
Television Worldwide, thank you for your comments. The love notes to Lisa Abramowitz and John Farrow and the hate mail I've received on the simulcast. Lisa, it's been pretty cool.
Yeah, it's been amazing.
Like we launched it and, we knew Farrow wouldn't work and, we just assumed that. So
okay, full disclosure, John Farrow is not out there heavily investing in Bitcoin, and he will be returning.
He will be returning
shortly
at
for
some
everyone
point
to know. But yes,
Yeah.
and I will say that my love notes are people saying you've gotten it wrong again and again with your bearishness. But I continue to be contrarian here, not necessarily from an investment call, but I still do wonder, looking at the pandemic news, there's still gloom.
I'm glad they give you a reason. They just email me and say, you've gotten it wrong, goodbye. Joining us now, someone who's gotten it right. Gina Martin Adams with Bloomberg Intelligence. And what has been so important about her and her team's work is the courage to participate in the markets. Gina Martin Adams, where do you find the courage right now to participate in the equity markets?
Well, I think most people, first, thank you for the compliment. Happy New Year, everyone. But I do think that most people who are looking at allocating assets across the spectrum of available asset classes see that the earnings yield on stocks is still extraordinarily high relative to the yield that you can get elsewhere. So despite the fact that there is negative news flow, despite the fact that the economy is not growing particularly quickly, you still get an earnings yield on stocks of about 4.4% compared to the 1% you can get in treasuries. The difference of those two asset earnings yields is the exact same it was at the beginning of 2017, just for a little bit of perspective. So to suggest that there's no value in equities, that we're overbought purely because of economic conditions kind of misses the broader perspective, and that is there's a tremendous amount of cash. There's a lot of capital out there. It's got to go somewhere, and it's naturally going to migrate to where it can get a decent amount of yield, especially in an environment where you're going to see risk improve through the year as the economic outlook improves. It's naturally going to go toward riskier asset classes.
I love how you talk about the earnings yield, and it goes to Tom's question earlier in the morning, this idea, are people going into stocks as a proxy for bonds because you're getting so much higher of a yield? There is a question, though, Gina, just digging under the headline numbers of the S&P and the NASDAQ. Is the rotation on, regardless of what we get from pandemic data or Washington, D.C., do you continue to get a rotation into cyclicals and away from tech?
Yeah, I think that's a really big question for this week specifically because, as you remember, I'm sure everyone recalls, prior to the election, tech had a really significant meltdown relative to the rest of the S&P 500, largely reflecting anticipation of a blue wave in Washington. We priced that out over the course of the several weeks after the election. I do think what you can see again is if we do have the Georgia election end up swinging more the Senate toward the Democratic side of the aisle, what you end up having is blue wave prospects back again impacting asset classes and asset prices, tech in particular, due to the anticipation of more onerous tax policy with respect to multinationals, in particular technology companies, and a potential regulatory wave as well. So a lot of this depends on what happens this week. I think in general, you do see, regardless of what happens in the elections, what happens in Washington over the course of the week,
right.
What happens over the course of the next few months in Washington, what you do see is a migration towards cyclicals favored in the earnings stream. So you're going to continue to likely see tech underperform some of the more rapid growth cyclical segments like financials that continued throughout the month of December, will probably continue into 2021 regardless of what happens in Washington. But it is very, it's questionable right now simply because we don't know what the outcome of the elections in Georgia are going to be.
Gina Martin Adams, I think most of our audience on radio and TV know it's about 40% plus of foreign sales, as you mentioned, of multinationals as well. What does a weak dollar do to the Bloomberg Intelligence view on our acclaimed multinationals?
Yeah, this is a great question, Tom. We actually wrote about
That's it. I'm done for the year.
Right before,
That's it.
right before the holidays, we wrote about this because there is this sort of misnomer out there that a weaker dollar is something of a panacea for tech and something of a big stimulant for multinational earnings. So the reality is that a weaker dollar actually benefits non-domestic stocks more than it benefits domestic stocks. Caps outperform large, value outperforms